Welcome back to the deep dive. I hope you're sitting down for this one,
Yeah, you might need to.
or at least somewhere where you can pause and really think, because today we're going to be break your brain a little bit.
That is absolutely the goal today. We are swinging for the fences.
We really are. Usually we dive into tech trends or ancient history or maybe a biography of someone famous. But today we are tackling a question that I think keeps a lot of us up at night, even if we don't realize it.
Oh, for sure.
It's the question that sits at the bottom of the glass after you've had a few too many drinks with friends and the conversation gets deep.
Right, the classic 3.0 AM existential crisis.
Exactly. And the question is simply this. Is the world around us, is it real?
Like, actually real.
Right, like, is this table I'm touching, is this microphone, are the trees outside the traffic on the highway, is all of this actually real? Or is it a trap? Is it a dream? Is it a dirty swamp that we are supposed to try to escape from?
It sounds like a sci-fi premise, doesn't it? It's the Matrix question before the Matrix even existed.
It totally is. Is it a simulation? Is it an illusion? Or is it something else entirely? Like, is it a concrete reality designed for us to master?
And that's the pivot.
Yeah, and to answer this, or at least to explore a very radical answer to this, we are diving into a stack of sources today centered on an analysis of a single verse from the Quran.
Surah 2, verse 164.
Right by the scholar Ghulam Ahmed Perwez. And I have to say, the sources we have today completely flipped my understanding of the relationship between science and faith.
I mean, that's what makes this particular deep dive so fascinating. Because usually when we talk about religion and science, we expect a fight.
Oh, absolutely.
We expect them to be oil and water.
Totally. Science is over here dealing with facts and atoms and gravity and things you can measure, and religion is over there dealing with the soul, morality, the afterlife, and things you just have to kind of feel.
Non-overlapping magisteria, as the academics call it. Stay in your lane.
Right. But the argument in our source material today is that this separation is actually the root cause of the decline of entire civilizations.
Which is a massive claim.
It's huge. It argues that the Quran came specifically to smash the idea that the world is an illusion. It argues that scientific inquiry, literally working in a lab, looking through a microscope, studying geology, is actually the highest form of worship.
Which is a huge shift from how we usually hear these things talked about. It's a bold claim to say that studying rocks is a religious duty.
It really is. So let's unpack this. Because to understand why this is such a radical idea, we first have to understand what people believed before this. We have to set the scene.
Yeah, we need that context.
The source provides this incredible historical backdrop, starting with what it calls primitive man.
Right. We have to really put ourselves in their shoes. Imagine you are an early human. Strip away the iPhone, the air conditioning, the antibiotics, the grocery store.
Oh, the safety nets?
Exactly. You are standing on a vast plain. You are small. You have soft skin. You have no claws. You are physically very vulnerable.
And the world isn't a workshop to you. It's a monster.
It's terrifying. Nature was this overwhelming, chaotic force. Imagine a thunderstorm rolling in. You don't know what electricity is. You don't know what air pressure is.
You just see fire in the sky.
All you know is the sky is screaming, the ground is shaking, and a bolt of light just split a tree in half 10 feet away from you.
Pure terror.
Pure terror. Or a flood comes and wipes out your entire camp. Or a snake bites your child and they die in agony for no apparent reason. You are completely helpless against these forces.
So naturally, how do you cope? You start worshiping them.
That's the psychological mechanism. You worship the fire so it doesn't burn you. You worship the snake so it doesn't bite you. You bow down to the moon because it rules the terrifying darkness, which is full of predators.
It makes sense.
The source describes this as a state of total submission. Man was submitting to nature out of fear.
It's a relationship based on helplessness. You are the victim of the world, so you beg the world to be nice to you.
Precisely. You're just trying to survive the chaos.
Okay, so that's the primitive stage. But then humanity evolves. We get civilization. We get the Greeks. We get the philosophers. The smart guys.
A heavy hitter.
Right. The sources mention Socrates and Plato. Now, I remember from college philosophy that these guys were the champions of reason. But the source argues they actually contributed to this idea of the world being fake.
It's a fascinating critique because we usually put these guys on a pedestal. But the source points out a specific flaw in their worldview regarding the material world. Take Socrates. He famously believed that only man was worth studying. Know thyself.
Right, look inward.
He thought the external universe, the stars, the physics of it all was irrelevant to the human condition.
So introspection over observation. Why look at a rock when I can look at my soul?
Exactly. And then Plato takes it a step further. Plato is famous for his allegory of the cave.
Refresh my memory on that one.
So Plato imagines a group of people chained inside a cave facing a blank wall. There's a fire behind them, and objects pass in front of the fire, casting shadows on the wall. The prisoners see the shadows and think, oh, that is a tree. That is a dog.
But they're just shadows.
Right. They aren't seeing the real thing. They are seeing a distortion.
And Plato's point was that our world, the world we see with our eyes, is just the shadows on the wall.
Yes. He viewed the material world as an illusion or a shadow. He believed knowledge gained through the senses sight, hearing, touch was unreliable and deceptive.
It tricks you.
He thought the real truth was something abstract that you can only find in your mind in the world of forms.
So if the physical world is just a shadow, why study it? Why bother figuring out how rain works or how the planets move if it's all just a trick of the light?
Exactly. It devalues the physical world.
Well,
It essentially kills science before it can even be born. Because why would you study a lie?
and the source draws a parallel here to Eastern mysticism as well, specifically Hindu Vedanta philosophy. They have this concept of Maya.
Maya means illusion or a mirage. The source mentions this incredibly poetic idea that the world is Ishwar's dream. The creator is sleeping, and we are just characters in his dream.
Which is a beautiful image, but also kind of terrifying.
It is.
Yeah.
Because if he wakes up, poof, we all disappear. The dream ends. Or it's described as Leela, a play or a game.
A theatrical performance.
Right. And if the world is just a stage play or a dream or a shadow, then what is the goal of religion?
It's to get out of it,
To wake up.
to leave the theater.
Exactly. Salvation becomes about escaping. The source uses very strong language here, saying that in this world of religion, matter was often seen as filth or a swamp that the soul is trapped in. You want to keep your spiritual skirts clean of the mud of the material world.
So you have this universal pre-Islamic or extra-Islamic view that says the world is scary or the world is fake or the world is dirty. Escape it, ignore it, or fear it.
And that is the massive historical wall that the Quran slams into. The source pivots here to the core argument of Ghulam Ahmed Perwez. He says the Quran arrived 1,400 years ago to fundamentally smash these illusions. It declares the universe as haq.
Huck. Okay, this is a key term in our deep dive today. We need to really understand this because the source seems to rely heavily on this one word.
It does.
Yeah.
It is the pivot point of the entire worldview. In Arabic, haq is usually translated as truth. But in this context, the source defines it very specifically against its opposite, which is batil.
Okay, let's start with the bad guy, Batil.
Batil is falsehood, but it also means a mirage, an optical illusion, something created in vain or the theatrical play. It's basically everything the ancient philosophers said the world was.
A toy house.
Yes, the source uses that image, a toy house that a child builds and then kicks over because it doesn't matter, it's temporary, it's meaningless.
And Hawk is the opposite.
Yes, haq means absolute truth, but specifically concrete existence, constructive purpose, and perfect design. When the source says the heavens and earth were created with haq, it means they are solid. They are real.
So if I kick a rock, it hurts whether I believe in it or not.
Exactly. It's not a mental projection. And more importantly, it isn't a toy. It has a specific purpose. The universe isn't a child's toy house that can just be kicked over. The source uses a brilliant metaphor here, calling the universe a workshop.
That word workshop is crucial.
It is. Think about the difference between a playground and a workshop. A playground is for fun. A workshop is a place of doing, of making, of evolving. It implies that there is work to be done. It implies tools. It implies a product.
And this leads us to the most scientific part of this theological argument, the unity of law, wadat-e kanun.
This is where the theology starts to sound like physics. The source argues that if the universe is haq, if it's real and purposeful, it must operate under consistent rules. You can't run a workshop if the saws work differently every day.
Right, so it introduces two major laws. First, the law of cause and effect.
Which means nothing is random. Every event has a cause. And a specific cause always produces a specific result. If you heat water to 100 degrees Celsius at sea level, it boils. It doesn't boil one day and freeze the next because the dreamer changed his mind.
And that leads to the second law, which is the law of uniformity of nature.
Right. The laws of physics don't change. Gravity worked the same way for the dinosaurs as it does for us. It works the same way in New York as it does in Tokyo.
Now, hold on. Usually when people try to prove God, they point to miracles. They point to things that break the laws of physics. Oh, the water turned to wine, that proves God. But the source is arguing the opposite.
That is the brilliance of Perwez's argument. He says that the consistency is the proof. If there were competing gods, or if the universe was a chaotic dream, the rules would change. One god might want gravity to push up, another wants it to pull down. Chaos.
A total mess.
But because the laws are consistent, rigid, even it proves a single unified will.
So the stability of physics is the signature of the creator.
Exactly. Yeah. Here is the kicker. Because the laws are consistent, humans can study them, we can predict them, and ultimately we can master them.
And this is where we get to the moon landing. I loved this example in the source. It feels like the ultimate mic drop on the primitive man mindset.
It really is. It illustrates the shift from worship to mastery perfectly.
So imagine primitive man again. He looks up at the moon, it shines in the dark, it controls the tides. He doesn't understand it, he is scared of it. So what does he do?
He bows, he worships, he writes myths about the moon god, he submits to the object.
Fast forward to 1969, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, the NASA team. How did they get there? Not by praying to the moon.
No, by calculating. By understanding the formula, by relying on the law of cause and effect. They knew exactly how much fuel they needed to escape Earth's gravity. They knew the trajectory. They trusted implicitly that the laws of gravity and motion were solid and unchanging.
They bet their lives on the consistency of God's laws.
They did. And the source quotes Armstrong. That's one small step for a man.
And the implication there is mastery. The moon used to be a deity. Now it's a landing pad. The source argues this is what the Quran intended, not for man to be a slave to nature, but for nature to be subservient to man, provided man understands the laws.
That is a massive flip.
Yeah.
You're not escaping the world. You're not bowing to the world. You're hacking the world. You're figuring out the code.
Hacking is a great way to put it, but you can only hack a system that has a code. If it's a dream, there's no code. If it's hacked, there is a code, and it's your duty to find it.
Precisely. And that brings us to the manual for finding that code.
Which brings us to segment 2. We've been talking theory, but let's look at the actual text Perwez is analyzing. Surah 2, verse 164. The source calls this the curriculum of the universe.
It really is a curriculum. If you look at the verse, it's basically a syllabus for a university science department.
It is. I have the list here. I'm going to read through what the verse mentions, and I want you to tell me what scientific field it corresponds to. Let's start with the first one. The creation of heavens and earth.
Astronomy and cosmology. The study of the origins of the universe.
The alternation of night and day.
Astrophysics. Planetary rotation. Timekeeping.
The ships sailing the ocean for human benefit.
Engineering. Hydrodynamics. Buoyancy. Archimedes' principle.
The rain falling from the sky to revive dead earth.
Meteorology and agriculture. The water cycle.
The dispersal of all kinds of animals.
Biology. Zoology. Taxonomy.
And the turning of the winds and clouds.
Atmospheric physics.
Now, if you read that verse superficially, or how it's often read in a traditional religious gathering, it just sounds like poetic scenery. Oh, look how pretty God's creation is. He made the clouds, mashallah.
Right. They treat it as a postcard, just scenery. But Perwez says stop. Look at the end of the verse. It says these are signs, ayat, for people who use their intellect. The Arabic word is yakilun.
Yakilun. That sounds active.
It is very active. It's not for people who just believe blindly. It's for people who think, who analyze, who reason, who connect the dots.
Let's talk about that word sign, or ayat, because this is really where the philosophy meets the road. The source uses a really helpful metaphor here about smoke and fire.
Yes, this is crucial for understanding the scientific method as a religious act. Think about smoke. If you see smoke rising from a distant hill, what do you know instantly?
I know there's a fire.
Even if you can't see the flames, even if the fire is hidden, the smoke is the sign. It represents the observable reality. Your intellect processes that data visual input of smoke and tells you smoke implies fire. The observable leads you to the unseen.
So in this context, the complex system of the universe, the rain, the wind, the ship sailing because of water displacement, those are the smoke.
And the organizer, the creator, is the fire. The source argues that looking at these things isn't just sightseeing. It is the primary method, the only reliable method of recognizing the creator. You can't just sit in a dark room and meditate him into existence. You have to look at his work.
This goes back to the critique of Plato. Plato said, close your eyes, the senses lie. The source says, open your eyes. The Quran defines knowledge specifically as that which is acquired through hearing sight and the heart.
And in Quranic Arabic, the heart, or fude, often refers to the mind, the processing center. So the formula for knowledge is input from the senses, like eyes and ears, plus processing by the intellect, meaning the mind.
That is literally the scientific method. Observation plus analysis.
It is, and the source is actually pretty harsh on this point. It mentions a verse that describes people who don't use these senses.
Yeah, I saw that. It's a biting critique. It says that those who have eyes but don't observe, and ears but don't listen to nature, and hearts but don't understand are worse than cattle.
Worse than cattle. That is rough.
It sounds like an insult, but there's a philosophical point there, right?
There is. Think about the logic. A cow follows its instincts. It eats grass, it gives milk, it follows the herd. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. A cow is being a perfect cow. It doesn't have the capacity to understand astrophysics.
But a human does.
A human is designed with the capacity to understand the stars, to understand the atom, to cure diseases. We have this incredible hardware, the frontal cortex. If a human ignores that potential and just eats and sleeps like a cow, they are failing their potential. They are falling below the level of the animal because the animal's at least doing what it's supposed to do. The ignorant human is wasting a divine gift.
That reframes ignorance completely. It's not just a lack of schooling. It's a spiritual failure. It's a sin of omission.
Exactly. If you ignore the signs, you can't find the destination. You are lost.
So if observing nature is the highest religious duty, then that completely changes our idea of what a religious scholar looks like. And this is segment 3 of our dive, The True Alim.
This is perhaps the most provocative part of Perwez's analysis for the modern believer. It challenges the hierarchy of the religious world.
Because when we say alim or scholar in a Muslim context, we usually have a very specific image.
Right. Someone in a robe, probably an older man with a beard, sitting in a library or a madrasa. He's surrounded by old books of theology, jurisprudence, grammar. He's debating abstract concepts of law.
Right. He's not in the lab coat. He's not holding a test tube. He's not out in the field digging up rocks.
But the source looks at the text and says, no, that's not how the Quran uses the word. The source points out that the Quran uses the term ulima, plural, of alim, specifically in the context of people who study nature.
Let's look at the syllabus of this alim according to the source. It lists specific fields derived from the verses. It lists meteorology, understanding how clouds form and rain falls. It lists botany, the variety of seeds, fruits, and colors. It lists biology, the diversity of life forms. And it lists geology, and this is specific. It mentions the layers and colors of mountains.
The layers of the mountains. That is such a specific detail. It sounds like stratification. The different colored bands of rock that show geological history.
Exactly. And the source argues who is the person who actually knows the layers of the mountains. Is it the theologian in the library?
No, it's the geologist. Who knows the intricate process of how a seed turns into a fruit? The botanist. The geneticist. Who knows the movement of the clouds? The meteorologist.
So Perwez is arguing that the scientist is the alim.
Yes, and here is the why. It's not just about knowing facts. The source says it is these scientists who, upon seeing the complexity of the universe, feel true awe. The Quran uses the word khashiyat.
Khashiyat, that's a beautiful word.
It is. It's often translated as fear, but it means a trembling awe born of understanding. It's the feeling you get when you realize how small you are and how massive the system is. Think about it. I can look at a mountain and say, wow, big mountain. But a geologist looks at it and sees millions of years of tectonic pressure, of folding of history. Their wow is much deeper than mine.
It's an informed awe.
Precisely. The source quotes the verse where these scholars exclaim glory to you. You did not create this in vain. You can only truly say it. You didn't create this in vain if you understand the purpose and function of it. If you don't know how a cell works, you can't appreciate the design of a cell.
This leads to a really stinging critique of modern religious education in the source. Because if the scientist is the true scholar, what does that make the guys who deny science?
It makes them irrelevant. The source mocks the unscientific views held by some traditional clerics, especially in the past. It mentions myths like the earth is stationary or the earth rests on the horns of a bull.
Or the 7 heavens being glass domes.
Right. Or the idea that God sits on a throne atop a sea that is 500 years' journey away.
It sounds like a fairy tale.
Because it is. And the source argues that when religious leaders teach these anti-scientific views, they don't just look silly, they disconnect faith from reality.
And the consequence of that is ridicule.
And irrelevance. If your definition of reality contradicts the observable haq, the concrete truth of the universe, then your religion becomes a fantasy. And remember, the Quran claims to be haq, so if you turn it into fantasy, you're actually going against the book you claim to follow.
That is a powerful pivot. It really reinforces this idea that you can't separate the two. You can't have a spiritual truth that contradicts physical truth. There is only one truth.
Exactly. Wadare konen, unity of law.
But I want to go back to that phrase, you did not create this in vain. Because sometimes, let's be honest, the world looks pretty messy. There are pests, there are diseases. It's hard to see the constructive purpose or perfect design in a mosquito.
This is segment 4. Everything has a purpose. The concept that there is no junk in the universe.
The source gives a great anecdote about American scientists and a useless bug.
Yes. This story illustrates the point perfectly.
Yeah.
So American scientists traveled to this region, likely South Asia, given the source, searching for a specific bug. The locals were baffled. They thought, why do you want this thing? It's useless. It just buzzes around.
It's annoying, take them all.
Exactly. They thought it was batil created in vain. But the scientists took them back to America. Why? Because they had discovered that this specific bug was a natural predator to a pest that was destroying their crops.
So the useless bug was actually a pesticide.
It was the cure. They imported the useless bug to save their agriculture.
That is such a classic ecosystem moment. We think something is useless because we don't understand the web it fits into.
The source calls this an aha moment. Humans call things useless only because of our own ignorance. The universe is a workshop, remember. In a workshop, there are all kinds of strange tools. If you don't know what the odd-shaped wrench does, that's your fault, not the wrench's. Every tool has a function.
And then there's the personal story from the author himself, Ghulam Ahmed Perwez. This one is a bit more visceral. It involves snake venom.
It's a very personal testimony. He writes that after a surgery, he had a severe complication. His blood wouldn't clot. It was a hemophilic reaction. He was bleeding out.
That is a terrifying situation.
Life was fading. The doctors were trying everything, but nothing worked. Finally, the doctor administered an injection derived from snake venom.
Snake venom, the stuff that usually kills you.
The stuff we fear. The stuff primitive man worshipped out of fear. But here, science had mastered the snake. They understood the chemical composition of the venom and realized that in the right dosage properly processed, it acts as a powerful coagulant.
So the agent of death became the agent of life.
Because they found the formula, the source says the snake, usually seen as an agent of death, contained the cure for life. Nothing in the universe is created without purpose. We just need to find the truth of it.
That really drives home the idea of the workshop. In a workshop, there are sharp tools, there are dangerous chemicals. If you don't know what you're doing, you'll get hurt. But that doesn't mean the tools are evil. It means you need to learn how to use them.
Precisely. Ignorance turns the workshop into a torture chamber. Knowledge turns it into a paradise.
And speaking of paradise, let's zoom out. We've talked about bugs and snakes. Now let's talk about nations. This brings us to segment 5, geopolitics, heaven and hell.
This is where the rubber meets the road. The source takes this theological concept and applies it to the world map. It divides the world into 3 categories based on this relationship with nature and divine law.
Let's break these down. Group 1 is the materialists. The source points clearly to the West.
Yes. The argument is that the West has embraced the first half of the equation. They have mastered the laws of nature. They respect the law of cause and effect. They study the signs.
They went to the moon, they cured the diseases, they built the ships, they mastered the workshop.
And the result? They have worldly paradise, wealth, power, comfort, infrastructure. The source says God rewards them for following his natural laws.
Wait, God rewards them, even if they aren't believers in the traditional sense.
Yes, this is the unity of law. If you follow the law of gravity, you don't fall, regardless of your theology. If you follow the laws of agriculture, you get crops. God doesn't cheat the system he created. The rain falls on the just and the unjust, provided they know how to farm.
That is fair, but the source says they have a hell in their social structure.
Right, because while they master the natural laws, the source argues they ignored the moral or divine laws regarding ethics, justice, and humanity. So you get a society that is rich, but predatory, spiritually empty. The source describes this as a form of hell, anxiety, social breakdown, exploitation, inequality.
Okay, so that's the West. Now group 2, the religious. This refers to the East, or specifically the Muslim world, in the source's context.
This is the tragedy of the analysis. This group claims to hold the divine book. They have the Quran. They claim to have the moral laws.
But they ignored the command to master nature.
They treated the world as an illusion or a waiting room for the afterlife. They didn't become scientists. They became mystics or ritualists. They sat on the prayer mat but ignored the lab.
And the result?
The source is brutal here.
Yeah.
Hell on earth. poverty, subjugation, dependence.
There's this striking image of the begging bowl.
Yes. The source explicitly mentions that despite having the Quran, the book that claims to be the ultimate truth, these nations have to hold out a begging bowl to the West saying, "Is there any wheat? Give us some."
That is a painful irony. The people with the truth are begging the materialists for bread.
And the source says this is not bad luck. It says, God does not help those who ignore his natural laws. You cannot pray for wheat if you don't plant it according to the laws of agriculture. There is no helper for the unjust, and in this context, being unjust means violating the laws of physical reality.
That's a harsh truth. God won't farm for you.
Exactly.
So group 3 is the ideal, the true believers.
This is the destination. The group that masters nature through science and follows divine values through ethics.
So they have the worldly paradise and the spiritual peace.
Exactly. They turn the earth into a paradise. The source calls this hasanat, goodness in this world and the next. They have the tools to build civilization, which is science, and the blueprint to make it just, which is ethics.
This really redefines the concepts of heaven and hell, doesn't it? We usually think of them as places you go after you die, but the source seems to be talking about them as states of being right here.
It does. It defines hell in this world as a life of disgrace, poverty, and reliance on others. Being blind to reality. If you're blind to the laws of nature, you live in darkness.
And heaven is mastery, provision, dignity, freedom.
And the kicker is the quote, "He who is blind in this world to natural laws will be blind in the hereafter."
Whoa. So if you don't study the microscope and the telescope here, you're going to be blind there.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
Because the hereafter is just the continuation of the journey.
Yeah.
If you fail to develop your intellect, your tool for recognizing God, here, you won't suddenly have it there. The process starts now.
That is heavy. It really raises the stakes of education. It's not just about getting a job, it's about your soul. It frames STEM education as spiritual development.
It does. It says that the lab is a sanctuary.
So let's bring this all together. We've covered a lot of ground today. We started with the question, is the world a trap or a reality? The source referencing Perez in Surah 2, verse 164, gives a definitive answer.
It says the material world is hack absolute truth. It's not a game. It's not a dream. It's a workshop.
And science is not the enemy of faith. It is the tool to uncover that truth.
And a true scholar in Elims is not just a theologian, but a scientist who sees the divine in the data. The geologist, the botanist, the physicist.
And the warning is clear. Ignoring science leads to societal slavery. Mastering it leads to freedom.
It's a call to action. It's saying that you cannot fulfill the purpose of your creation if you disengage from the creation itself.
I want to leave you, the listener, with the final provocative thought from the source. It's a challenge to the way we think about suffering.
The source challenges us if we are suffering as a society. If we are poor or sick or weak, it is not God's will in the sense of a mystical test we just have to endure.
It's not God wants us to be poor so we can be humble.
No. It is the direct result of our failure to engage the laboratory of the universe. We failed the lab class. The universe operates on strict cause and effect. If we don't like the effect, which is poverty, we have to change the cause, which is ignorance.
And the closing question for you is this. If true worship requires understanding what you are worshiping, can you truly be religious without being scientific?
Can you admire the artist if you refuse to look at the art?
That is the question. Something to think about the next time you look up at the moon or down at a bug. Thanks for diving in with us.
Always a pleasure.
See you next time on The Deep Dive.